Didn't recognise you without the cap, so. Yes, yes. Well, those dulcet tones surely mean that this is another time for Property Quorum, the fourth in our week's worth of property broadcasting. Today's show is all about perception versus reality. Yes, I do like those kind of things. So, headlines versus reality in the housing market. We have, of course, Silas Jellies of Wigwam, Zara Olibokas of Nexa Law, our tame legal eagle, and of course, the Lord and Master Hamish McClay of Surgical Bay, who will, in fact, start us off. Hamish, please.
Well, I don't know where the Lord and Master came from, but I don't mind it being said of me. Right. Good morning to you all. It's not quite as bright this morning in Oxfordshire, but I haven't actually read the papers to actually find out about it. One of the challenges we all face, whether it's to do the housing market or whatever, is what different aspects of newspapers, online sort of types of forum, the media generally. I think the popular media is the absolute worst when you look at things like Sky News and BBC News, and even ITV for that matter, but Sky News and BBC News particularly, they love playing with extremes, and they'll actually miss out an awful lot of reality, and they just like to glamorize sort of certain things, and as do certain papers, and we get specialists coming in and going out and making their comments, and very often very few of them are actually working on the ground. They aren't working with estate agents. They don't know what's going on as far as the estate agent is concerned. They don't know what's going on in the conveyancing world. They don't understand the complications between a conveyancer, what the term conveyancer might actually construe, what it might mean, because we have property lawyers who are trained actually in law, and we have conveyancers, supporters, who can actually sort of do things, but unfortunately, they're not qualified in law. So when we come up with complicated matters, this can cause an awful lot of channels. But unfortunately, the popular media like to put a brush on the whole thing. But what we're really speaking about today, things are being said without the understanding of really what is going on in the property market. And very often, things are just chugging along. Yet depending on who is speaking, who is writing, it will depend on what particular sort of angle they want to be writing at. It's a bit like statistics. You can use them for all sorts of wondrous things. But the really important thing is what is actually happening on the ground.
Well, my goodness, I think we'll go straight over to Silas. What is happening on the ground, Silas?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Gareth. And as Henry said, the media will paint a headline picture, but you have to dive into the data over a longer time frame to try and understand what's really going on. Now, I'm one of these people who has probably predicted many of the forthcoming recessions that haven't happened, but there's been an underlying picture of economic uncertainty, which doesn't paint a bright future for the wider economy and the housing market to boot. And one of the things that I've noticed is that since 2008, there were many issues that were created in the financial system that weren't actually worked out. And the can was kicked down the road through the lowering of interest rates and the printing of an enormous amount of money, which, of course, has caused record inflation around the world. And now we're getting to the point where those chickens are starting to come home to roost. So what's happened, the reason why we haven't had a property market crash, which is, what many people were expecting, including myself, was because if you look at the data and you look at the amount of 30-year and 35-year mortgages that are being brought in by or being taken by first-time buyers and second-time home movers, trying to make affordability work in a housing market where property prices have risen astronomically, yet wages haven't moved at the same time or at the same pace. So we now have an affordability equation that isn't working for a lot of people. And the only way it works is by taking a longer term on the mortgage. And that brings down the monthly payments for many people. The challenge being, of course, is that the disposable income that most households have is then being channeled into their mortgage rather than being spent in the local economy. And this is why I think we're seeing many local businesses suffer. And it's not painting a great picture, particularly when you look at things like, I think the headline was yesterday around the government now giving out more on benefits than it's actually taking in income tax revenue. So the forward-looking picture isn't looking so bright. I also, as a side note, look at what's happening in America. And America tends to be the lead, and we follow what's happening over there. Now, I'm seeing some very interesting statistics around the level of new home inventory that's sitting on the market. It's worse than it was in sort of 2009, 2010, which suggests there's less people buying. I'm also seeing some shocking statistics of commercial property being sold at 10% of its former value, because of all this work from home business and everything else. So there are massive losses that property developers and investors are taking, which is usually backed up by pension funds, etc. So there's a whole intertwined economic picture that's not just quite as easy to answer as like what's going on, but you start to look at some of the trends and it points to either a gradual slowing down of the market or a correction, which is probably long overdue in my opinion.
Wow. Now, Zara, you were saying in the green room, although the world may be changing around the scene, people just aren't taking any notice of your advice. What the hell's that?
Well, I've seen lots of people complaining online that they've had issues with their solicitors, conveyancers, and it's not clear whether or not they went to a factory outfit, whether they went to a solicitor. Now, since 2007, when the previous Labour government came into force, they basically said, right, anybody can provide legal services, and they can do it for cheap as chips. It was designed to promote competition, but what it's taken out of the process is integrity. So you've got lots of firms out there that pay huge referral fees, and despite the Panorama program, national trading standards still haven't taken any action against the estate agents who pay those referral fees and basically shoehorn people into either the seller or the buyer to use their recommended services. We've still got the developers bullying people to, stick to their ridiculous 28-day exchange deadlines. Even when they've accepted somebody in a chain, they're expecting everybody else to pay to their tune. So you can literally be harassed daily basis, 2 or 3 times a day by the site office to progress matters. And it's like, you accepted somebody in a chain, you need to hold your horses. You will get your money, but you have to wait.
It does sound like a license to misery. Surely,
no wonder people are complaining.
Well, of course, but I believe that without mentioning any names or any particular national organs or news outlets, there have been certain people complaining that solicitors aren't pulling their weight. I believe you've got strong feelings on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks that every conveyancer is the same, that they will get you from A to B. I had a bizarre experience yesterday where a client quoted back to me my mantra, which is fast, cheap, and quality. You're only going to get 2 out of the 3.
Yes.
It was a bit weird because obviously he said I was doing a better job than his previous solicitor.
Well, of course you are, because you bloody care. That's the only difference.
Yeah. Well, but people are happy. We've got this price transparency, which is being promoted quite fiercely by the regulator, but people don't understand what they're being quoted. Another ridiculous thing I saw the other day was a £45 plus VAT charge for when you've bought the property, they'll charge you another £45 to send the document to you to show you that you own the property. I mean, how do they get away with that? There's some things that are the basic building blocks within conveyancing, and when you're quoted a fee, the basic blocks should be there. And if you're being charged extra for the basic blocks, that's not transparency. That's kind of, you've got a pick and mix menu, and not everybody will understand how to pick and mix, will they?
No, I think there are, Silas, there are stories that we can all bring up whereby a supposed expert has effectively shanghaied us for a little bit of extra cash at the last minute that we weren't expecting. I can tell you a quick brief story. My father did some work with a solicitor, and they said, shall we just live over the bridge from you? Shall we walk it over the bridge to you? They did that and then charged us 130 quid for the privilege. So we can all tell stories of that. But as Zara says, apparently anyone can say they're a conveyancer now.
I mean, this is one of the frustrations that's baked into the problems in the housing market, and it's on many levels. But a lot of it revolves. Conveyancers cop a lot of the blame, and it's not really their fault. But what is their fault is tying into a business model that doesn't work for them, the estate agent, or the conveyancer, and that is the model of referral fees. We estimate that around 70% of all transactions attract a referral fee in some form or another. And what that does is it strips out the profit margin from the actual work and passes it across to the estate agent. Now, when somebody's doing a job and they're not actually making any money from it, what incentive do they have to go faster? It just doesn't work. And so this is where the whole model starts to break down. And so you look at the law firm owners who are running conveyancing as a business model. What are they going to do? They're not making any money. So can they really afford to employ the best staff? Can they really afford to look after them, give them the best possible support network around them? They really can't. And I have seen models of a guy running a £2 million turnover law firm who's losing money. And when he brought the figures to me, he said, I can't understand why I'm losing money. I can't understand why I'm losing money. I'm like, well, you're giving 20% of your top line revenue away in referral fees. Okay.
Right.
So an enormous amount of money sitting in somebody else's bank account that should be in yours to make your job profitable. And conveyancers are doing this to win the job, but they're actually neglecting their client in doing so, because the client doesn't know that they're signing up for 26 weeks of hell and stress and all sorts of uncertainty. And they don't understand what an estate agent or what a conveyancer as a true professional really does for their money. So all they can do is chase and find out what's going on. I want my keys. Tell me what's going on. Well, there's a process that needs to be administered if you're to acquire this property safely, bearing in mind you're going to be tied to a 25-year mortgage. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of pounds. You want to make sure you get it right. But nobody is taking the time to educate the client in what's involved. And
right.
So, none of this is really working for anybody, the client, the estate agent, or the conveyancer. Worse, 59% of clients don't know that they're actually paying a referral fee. And if they knew how it affected them in their journey, I think there'd be an uproar.
Well, of course, any kind of like the conditional selling and all that nonsense, it's absolutely ridiculous. That nationwide, is it nationwide? Was it nationwide, Zara? That nationwide program, was that? It was
BBC Panorama program.
Panorama, there we go. That Panorama program, you'd have thought it would shake the community to the rafters, but it doesn't seem to have made that much difference.
No, because people are just too entrenched. They have FOMO. They've got no way of differentiating themselves between, their competitors apart from price. And the whole media have, not even the media, the government have made it all about price, make conveyancing cheap. And yet they don't understand the mess that they've left us in. Where, I was on a course yesterday, literally she spelled out, we've had a new piece of legislation every year since 2022 to contend with. So no wonder things are such a mess. But it's not going to be solved until it's a people problem. and the fact that a lot of law firm owners, they kind of think that, you know, which is the lesser of two evils, you know, keeping their staff paid and paying the referral fees, or actually doing the right thing, taking less staff and getting the work done properly.
And sorry, not to mention the fact that you've mentioned to me before that some of this, and I'm a great believer in outsourcing, but some of this is outsourcing to countries foreign. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure that this process, given that you need some level of boots on the ground, is something you can do outsource successfully. What's your thought?
I'm sitting there scratching my head because, you know, the people sitting in a country on the other side of the equator, you know, their English might not be so good. You know, they're not going to have a chat with you about the weather. And you might be working to their opening hours, not ours.
Right.
And they have little understanding of what's going on over here in the property market. So you've got this kind of bubble, and what we should be providing is holistic advice. And what we're finding is it's being turned into a factory process where the client is taken in, and they're treated like a tin of bean. Right, this bit done. Right, next, you know, pour the tins in the bean, cook the beans, whatever you're doing. It's being treated like a factory line. And there's no continuity. There's nobody holding the client's hand to say, don't worry, it's all being dealt with. And then right just before they're ready to go, you know, it's having to go to a senior person in the UK to double check everything. And that then causes another few days delay.
Hamish, it seems to me that ever since Ford popularised the factory line process, that they've been trying successfully year after year to apply it to everything. Now it seems conveyancing's on it. And we've talked about factory conveyancing before. I think you pay the money and you take your choice. But here we are, as I said, a program unveiling some of the iniquities going on behind the scenes. We are in a crisis of confidence in this marketplace, yet the buyers are taking no notice of the advice given by capable experts like Zara. What to do?
Well, we got a challenge actually, because what will happen when you get the qualified professional, experienced professional like Zara who's saying one thing, and you've got basically somebody, because they don't understand the full extent of what the law is, they're saying, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. Whose advice are they going to take when they want to get the key to get in? Because what Zara's doing, what a professional is doing, is looking what's going to happen in the future. Is that property resellable? Is there all sorts of, and all the complicated things, as Zara mentioned earlier, relative to leaseholds and stuff. There's not enough qualified solicitors about to actually being able to sort of get involved with that, but to actually give the answers. And I think the problem is, in hindsight, many people, many buyers, for example, will actually look at their journey and sort of say, oh, it was because of, and they'll try and put because they don't understand what was going on in the background. So they'll say, well, but they never spoke to their conveyancer. They didn't outline to their conveyancer what they genuinely wanted. And they didn't actually understand that whoever was putting on the market was using a factory conveyancer anyway. I mean, one of the interesting comments Zara made there, and I mentioned this several probably several years ago now, but it always amused me that I was assisting in the purchase of a property down in Cornwall that somebody was going to put their ponies on. It was just a little field. A friend was selling it to a friend, and unfortunately involved with the conveyancing malarkey that was sort of going on. But the details came out, it was Sierra Leone or somewhere or other. I don't know quite where it was from, but along came this particular thing, and they wanted to identify whereabouts all the electrical circuits were in all the various rooms on this field. And you're actually sort of thinking there, they were asking about kitchen appliances and all sorts of things. They didn't seem to understand we were speaking about a piece of land, and not a particular sort of property. But they said it was holding up the process unless this was completed. So I had to help them actually complete this particular sort of thing. And then when they actually came back, we'd identify where the water supply was in, because there was a water trough there, which was great. Sent them a planner, and then they said, well, we need to know where the water is coming in. You need to send us a plan. We said, well, we have sent you a plan, but we had to send it again, and it was absolutely absurd. This whole thing was taking weeks and weeks and weeks, and basically, the people, it was a bit like you were sort of saying, where the solicitor was. These were two friends living in a village,
Right.
and it took more than 3.5 months to actually get the whole thing done because of this absurdity of all these daft questions that were being asked. However, to bring us back to what we were actually speaking about, there is a lot that's being said within the media, in fact, some of it particularly, and they're not necessarily the front line sort of papers that are pulling up this information and telling us various different stories. But fundamentally, and I think that this was evident, and it'll come up again tomorrow, this particular, when actually they bring somebody in as a spokesman, as the sad aspect is Reform UK, which may be doing remarkably well, a spokesman comes up, he's brand new to sort of Reform, he's brand new, people haven't heard of him as much before, and he turns out, well, people are going to die anyway, so
Yeah. Yes.
and that
I
hits
believe
headlines.
that.
I mean, the absurdity of the whole particular sort of thing. Now, that's a fairly obvious aspect of life. We all know that to be true, but you don't speak about that after the situations that were actually sort of caused as a consequence of some of the flats that have been built over time. And when we look at the horrific sort of aspect of what happened with sort of Grenfell. But of course, it depends who's writing the story, because we've still got people writing stories to say the cladding is perfectly okay. I mean, Greenwich Council, for example, and you've seen the papers, they are sending details to the papers saying there's nothing wrong with these flats. Yet there's all this background information, which is, if you look into it and you look at some of the newspapers, they will tell you what's wrong with the flat. So who are you meant to believe?
Yeah, go
I
on,
mean,
Tara.
part of the stories in the news is the developers saying, they're not building as much, especially in London, but because they're saying it's not worth their while.
Right.
It's it's a vicious circle, because if they built the property properly in the first place, they wouldn't have to come back round and spend more money trying to fix it. And so we've got this catch-22 where there's nobody there actually saying you must do this properly, because we all know the people that sign it off, they're paid by the developers to sign it off. So where's the trust gone in the system? We've got people who are buying in good faith that they've bought a property, yet none of these recommended conveyancers will be warning them about the risks of buying a new build. And especially, we've got every single new build site in the last 25 to 30 years with an estate management company. So, I was watching yesterday on the news a story about, my local area being full of potholes and the council not having money to repair them. But what happens on these private roads, that are managed, we don't know to what standard those roads were built. And sooner or later, the bills are going to hit the homeowners. And it's just waiting for the clock to tick until that explodes when people are asked for bills to pay these bills. But with freehold houses, there's no mechanism for consultation. So what I'm seeing is the increasing privatization of infrastructure. So you could potentially have a massive development site, but it's all managed privately. We've not got a separate solicitor acting for the management company to check the developers have done everything to standard. And of course, if they're not being obliged to do agreements with the council for the adoption of the roads and water sewers, they could do half a job, leave the problem to fester, and then 20 years down the line, the homeowner is going to have to fork out thousands per property to contribute to fix these issues. And again, we don't have any method of accountability to make sure it's done to a high standard. Because they're, you know, if it's managed by the residents, they're going to want to do it as cheaply as possible.
Of course.
Or, you know, if you want it done properly, most
Yes.
people don't, you know, they take the view that, you know, cheap as chips is fine. It will do the job for now, kind of
Yes.
thing.
If you want it cheap and quick, you can't have it done well. Isn't that the adage?
Yeah.
Well, by the way, our pothole situation around here is so bad. I'm thinking of calling Rod Stewart and bring his team down to get them sorted out. He seems to be more efficient. Hamish, would you care to take us home?
Well, I think it's sort of quite clear. There is a reality which is running through what is going on with the property market, and it very rarely sort of actually comes to the surface as to the true nature of anything that's sort of going on. And anybody that does start trying to speak the truth, they get sort of slapped down. And it's a sad thing. There's a lot of things that need to come together. And unfortunately, the consultation, which the government's encouraging, which all these various other people, the sort of stakeholders, we're looking at one, my organisation of which I'm chairman, and we're actually finding the members of that particular consultation are not true representatives of the property market as a whole. There's not a solicitor in there, for starters. I mean,
Good Lord.
Where do you go? There's not an estate agent in there.
Well,
there's a couple of banks and things like that, of course.
I'm hoping this is purely a transitory situation, Hamish. That the just over the crest of that hillock over there, the sun will be shining, and there'll be a solicitor fully trained up, involved in every conveyancing situation. He says, tongue in cheek. Thank you so much, Zara Olibokas of Nexa Law. Thank you, Silas J. Lees of WikiWham, and of course, Hamish McClay of Search Conveyance. To you for watching us. I saw a whole bunch of new listeners come in and come out. We tend to run roughly 20 minutes. It's been a bit long, but it's been a good bun fight today. I hope you agree. Now, there was a mention of cladding. Of course, got Cladding Matters tomorrow at 1:00. Come along for that. There's some more revelations coming there. And as usual, great stories and good infotainment, I believe is the correct term for it. Until next time we speak, please keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. And for goodness sake, look after your mental health. Bye-bye now.